Arcane Season 1 is out in full on Netflix. It's the first and presumably not the last animated show based on League of Legends, one of the most popular video games of the last decade. It was released in 3 chapters, 3 episodes each, 40 minutes per episode. Now, I am a League fan. I've played the game religiously for something like 5 years and followed the esports side even longer than that, and even though I'm not an active player anymore, I do occasionally pop in for a game or two with friends. So I was going to check out the show no matter what, out of sheer curiosity, even if the trailer didn't promise solid quality of animation already. And I think, no joke, millions of people were in that same boat as me. I think the show had a built-in audience by default, regardless of its actual quality. Having that in mind, I will say that I am completely blown away by how fantastic the show turned out to be. As I was watching the final episodes, I contemplated if perhaps this would be one of the rare 10 out of 10s for me, something completely perfect which I wouldn't change a single thing about. In the end, it came a little bit short, for one reason only basically. The season ends on a cliffhanger without resolving many of its storylines. Now, admittedly, Riot Games have already confirmed that the second season is coming, along with other animated shows and possibly even something live action. So who knows, if the remaining season or seasons keep up this level, it may be perfect in the end as a whole. And certainly, if we treat season 1 as the opening act, it is as close to perfection as one can get. The story is told in twos, so to speak. There are 2 main storylines, each happening in one part of a twin city, each focusing on 2 characters and the way their relationship develops over the years. The main plot revolves around 2 sisters, Vi and Powder, who eventually, as fans of the game will expect, adopts the nickname Jinx. At the beginning of the show, they're basically kids. They're part of a small-time gang of these teenage rascals and thieves trying to navigate through the difficulties of life in this dirty, steampunky, dark and foggy undercity. People are poor, fighting for scraps from the richer part of town called Piltover. There's violence, danger, and drugs lurking at every corner, and one day the gang manages to steal something from a lab in Piltover, an object of huge magical power which very quickly will draw the attention of larger players and send the 2 girls on a pretty tragic trajectory. The second storyline has to do with who that object was stolen from. Jace is a young prodigy scientist working tirelessly to try and tap the power of the Arcane. Use magical objects as a power source for the various mechanical contraptions designed to make life better for people. As a result of the break-in and the subsequent distraction caused by the magical objects, he is almost banished from the university for even tampering with them. Almost, because a crippled young man named Victor offers his help in both the research and keeping Jace in good graces. That's as much as I'm saying about the plot. There are many intertwining storylines apart from these main 2. There's a bunch of other characters from the game that show up in larger or smaller parts. There are also new original characters created specifically for the show, like the main villain, Silco. And I do want to start with the characters, because this is what surprised me the most. See, with the built-in audience that the show had, I was fully expecting it to go for the lowest possible effort. I just expected the characters to be simply drawn, be defined by a single characteristic each, and maybe if we had one compelling conflict somewhere in there, that would be cool. Well, every single character in the show, including secondary and even tertiary ones, are incredibly well written. Everybody has their own motivations that make sense with who they are and their background. Everyone has their own set of values, and by extension, everyone experiences some sort of internal conflict when those values are challenged. And then they come into interactions with one another, which expands that conflict to an external one. As these personalities and motivations clash, storylines are moved forward. Crucially though, even the most basic narrative roles are quite deep and multidimensional here. I'll give the example of Silco, the villain I mentioned, who I think is really up there in the pantheon of compelling villains. Because in this story, he is the bad guy, no doubt about that. And his ethics and methods and the way he doesn't shy away from violence and hurting other people makes him quite scary indeed. But first of all, we learn through his backstory that he does have a genuine reason for having this particular worldview. He's definitely a product of his own experiences. And secondly, even as he raises to power eventually, he's not the type of villain that wants to rule the world, or even cares only about himself. He genuinely believes that he can make life better for his people, even if his methods are twisted. And on top of that, he has a fierce loyalty that is tested many times, and especially in the final episode was just amazing to watch. He's one of those villains that you really have to respect, even if you disagree with him, just for the sheer force of his conviction and the way he sticks to his own moral code. And that is just one character in a whole ensemble. I won't go too much into detail on others because I think it is a joy to watch their stories unfold without prior knowledge, but know that they are all fantastic. And here's another point about prior knowledge. I think that the show is going to be equally as interesting to people who have had no contact with the game before as for the fans. And that is a direct result of the stuff I talked about before, namely how well it draws and develops the characters. You don't really have to know anything about them. There will be no blanks to fill in because the show tells you everything you need to know. And of course, it does that in mature ways, respecting its audience. There are no huge exposition dumps or wooden dialogue to explain what's going on. In fact, a lot of the story is told purely visually. Which brings me to my next important point, which is the animation style. It is gorgeous. I mean, just go see the trailer and know that the whole show is better still than what was shown there. The show just looks like a hybrid between hand-drawn animation and CG in the best way possible, and while it is probably entirely CG, it has a distinct style, which means it looks completely unique. The only thing it reminded me of at some point was Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which is high praise indeed, because I did score that movie 10 out of 10. Arcane is very kinetic, lively, it is masterful at using color, it can sometimes be fast-paced with blink and you miss it action sequences, but it can also slow things down when it needs to, using terrific framing and gorgeous lighting to paint a more static picture. The two shots that immediately come to mind is episode 6 and Jinx with the flare, and then episode 9, I think, with Jace standing next to a mural depicting soldiers with spears sort of aimed at him. Just such brilliance, and especially that mural scene. I look at it and I think they didn't have to do it. That scene would work without it. But someone out there, some artists working on this show from the studio thought, how can we make this at the same time more pleasing to the eye, but also immediately telling us something more about the situation in the scene without using dialogue? It's the little things like that which show the amazing level of care that went into preparing Arcane. Final quick points on the sound. Both the music and voice acting are top-notch. Imagine Dragons even recorded a song specially for the show, and even though I wasn't blown away by it during the opening credits, it kind of grew on me when it was actually used in one of the episodes themselves. Overall, I think this is a must-watch, even if you're not a huge fan of animation, and even more so if you're not a fan of League of Legends. It is just an extremely well-done show on its own. It doesn't need that connection to be appreciated. Honestly, between the characters, storylines, dialogue, animation and music, I am very close to calling it a masterpiece. I won't do it just yet, because the story is not quite finished, but this first season has been nothing short of excellence, and I am impatiently looking forward to see more.